What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Court Storm College Hoops Talk podcast, which you can find right here on the Court Storm Media Network. My name is Kanaye, and I'm here with my co-host, Josh. And it's been a little while since we've uploaded on this podcast. Me and Josh have unfortunately just ran into some scheduling conflicts over the last couple weeks, but nonetheless, we are bringing you guys a new episode today. We're going to be talking about this week's AP poll, our thoughts regarding that, as well as naming some teams that have risen as of late. They've played a lot better basketball than they were to start the season. We'll also talk about some teams that are doing the complete opposite and definitely rest in our eyes over the last couple of games. On top of that, there's a lot of coaches' seats around the country that just seem to be heating up every day, I should say, as every day goes on, and a lot of coaches that we could see on their way out at the conclusion of this season. We'll be naming some potential coaches that could end up getting fired at the end of this college basketball season. But before we get into all of that on this episode, please engage with the content you see on this channel in any way you can, whether it's liking, subscribing, or just telling other people about the Court Storm. Everything goes a long way with influencing YouTube's algorithm. Everyone knows how important the algorithm is to getting more people to see our videos. On top of that, turn on post notifications so you are the first to see our latest content. So let's get right into with the AP poll. Josh, I'll turn it to you first. Any big movement or anything that catches your eyes that you want to talk about?
I think from that top 5 to 10, the biggest movement has been Illinois. They are now the 5th ranked team in the country, and that is so well-deserved. Great road win at Purdue, and then followed up with an honestly even better road win at Nebraska. These are just insane wins. You don't really get those together in a season, let alone near back-to-back. If you're going to ask me, they have a really good shot at winning the Big Ten and competing for that 1 seed alongside Michigan. Beyond that, Nebraska drops to, I'm not annoyed about it. It does suck, but they're still a great team. And same thing with Michigan State for losing at home against Michigan. They probably should have won that game, but regardless of the matter, they're still a very good team. I think a couple fallers in the 10 through 20 have been pretty expected, I guess. BYU lost 2 games. Virginia lost. Arkansas lost a few. There have definitely been some regresses in a lot of the power teams. But St. Louis is looking great. St. John's got ranked again. There's definitely been a large amount of growth towards the bottom half of teams that are coming back in or new to everything. So really, honestly, it's not, once again, not a bad poll. Really happy about it. Really curious to see where we go in the coming weeks.
Michigan State fell a little bit. Of course, they suffered the losses to Michigan as well as, or just to Michigan, my mistake. Nebraska fell a little bit. Of course, they suffered the loss to Michigan as well as the loss to Illinois at home that Josh talked about, which is why Illinois moved up into being a top 5 team in the nation. Outside of that, Kansas rose. They've had some big wins that they picked up. You mentioned the BYU game. They fell quite a bit. Florida's on the rise. They're now moved up to 17th in the country. But outside of that, overall, the others receiving votes. Texas A&M, I definitely think had a valid case to be in this week's poll. Nonetheless, Tennessee, they're kind of just hanging on by a thread in the poll, it seems, right now. Alabama fell out of the poll after their loss to Florida this past Sunday. Definitely kind of saw that coming. And UCF, man, I think UCF has a legitimate chance to be ranked. I'm a really big fan of this UFC program. Huge win at home against Texas Tech. The really unique double court storm you got when the game didn't officially end. But nonetheless, huge win for the UCF Knights there.
Definitely.
I feel the poll was pretty solid this week, as they have been the entire season. But let's get into some rise.
I actually do have one thing.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it.
And I actually mentioned this to Kanaye earlier. This top 10 is so laughably good compared to anything we've seen before. I mentioned it before how last year the top 4 really solidified themselves. By now we're getting almost double that, and to really put into consideration, there are 18 combined losses in the AP poll top 10. In the women's poll, which typically has a lot less of those losses, there are actually 22 losses in that top 10. So this top 10 is more concisely better than the women's top 10. That is just insane. I had to just bring it out there.
Yeah, that just tells you how good this season of college basketball has been. You have arguably the greatest top of the sport we've seen up to this point in the season. You could argue this is the greatest freshman class we've ever seen. I think I'm a firm believer in that statement. But, it just goes to show the parity across the sport right now between NIL, the transfer portal, the insane talent of the freshman class that came in this year. It's great. I think it's going to make for one of the better tournaments of the last couple of years, as good as the Final Four was last year. Like you mentioned, there's a legitimate argument you can make for any of these teams in the top 10 to take home a chip in Indianapolis this year. But now let's get into the risers and fallers. I'll ask you, Josh, how do you want to do this? Do you want to go back and forth, name the risers first, or you want to go riser, faller?
Do you want to do rise and I do fall?
Sure, I'll do rise. I'll start off with Illinois. I mean, that was the team we mentioned at the start of the video. They've moved up to fifth in the AP poll this week. Just what they've done over the last couple of games, it's really, I mean, a lot of it comes down to Keaton Wagler. There's a legitimate argument I think you can make for Keaton Wagler to potentially be Big Ten Player of the Year. If he continues to play this way, he's damn sure going to be on the first team Big Ten. He is going to be first team Big Ten selection at the conclusion of conference play. And I mean, what he's done, and 43 points against Illinois. I think it was 46. I forget off the top of my head. The win against Nebraska, where he was huge down the stretch for them. I mean, Illinois, they're on the rise. You typically do see this with some of the better Brad Underwood teams. I think back to the 23-24 season where they were kind of dealing with the whole situation that Terrence Shannon Jr. was in. It took him a little bit of a while to get going following that suspension. Marcus Damas took a little bit of time to get going, and then once they hit the tournament, or I should say play it, once they hit postseason play, they won the Big Ten tournament, went on a nice little run in March to the Elite Eight. And I think Illinois is hitting their stride at the right time. They are definitely in contention to be a 1 seed this year. Me and Josh, before recording today, we're talking about a hypothetical matchup. Well, not hypothetical. We are going to be getting in Champaign later this season between Michigan and Illinois, and who we think could win. I honestly would pick Illinois right now, especially at home. I think Illinois has a formula to be able to beat Michigan in some of the closer games we see Michigan play, as well as their loss to Wisconsin in Ann Arbor this year, where you need bigs that can space the floor. Illinois has that between Tomislav, Zvonimir, David Mirkovic. Keaton Wagler is a guy who could definitely break down that backcourt off the dribble and hit shots, like Ellie Cadeau and Amari Burnett. That's not the greatest defensive backcourt. I think even when matched up with Yaks and Roddy Gale, Keaton's still going to be able to get to cooking. And I mean, hey, they don't even have Boswell right now. I legitimately thought that Illinois' season was going to be in shambles once Boswell went down, and they've honestly looked better right now without him than they were with him. And I'm not saying Boswell is an important piece of this team. I think once he comes back, he's definitely going to contribute and add to what they already have going. And hey, Ty Rodgers, it's continuing to be up in the air if he's going to play this year. If they get him back, that's another defensive dimension they have off the bench, and Illinois could be in contention to win the Big Ten and be a 1 seed.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a smart choice. And I'm really glad that Illinois has had this rise, because we saw in the start of the year they didn't look crazy good. They had that loss to UConn that me and Kanaye both went to. And I lost that type of mentality of them being a Final Four team. I think that they are definitely where they were. In my mind, when I had seen them at the start of the year, I didn't think Keaton Wagler was going to be the guy either. I don't think anyone ever did. But I'm so glad that they turned into the team that they are, and I really do hope they challenge Michigan and maybe even get that 1 seed. My biggest faller over these past 2 weeks is actually another Big Ten team, that being Purdue. When we were last recording, they were the 4th ranked team in the country. They were definitely in competition for beating Michigan. They were also undefeated in conference. They lose 3 straight, including at IU, but also including that Keaton Wagler 46 piece at Mackey, and losing on a last minute game winner by Tyler Bilodeau at UCLA. They did respond back at Maryland, but that's nothing to be said about. This team has definitely had its struggles, particularly on its defense. It is unfortunate to see Purdue being taken advantage of, considering how good of a team this Purdue team is. I do think they're going to bounce back over the coming weeks, because they do have to play Michigan at Mackey very soon, and that could be a really strong sign of where things are going to go in the future. But overall, that is a team that I just feel like I just had to put out there as the biggest faller, because they just haven't really looked good at all.
I was hoping you were going to bring up Purdue, because I honestly haven't gotten your thoughts on sort of the 3-game skid they had between the games against UCLA, Illinois, and Indiana. And I'm honestly not hitting the panic button from your perspective, or if I am a Boilermaker fan. Listen, good teams, they go through rough stretches. I mean, from the UConn angle, 6 of 8 they lost in January in the 23 season. It happens sometimes. Purdue is still very much a national title contender. They got to figure out the defense, but I think, you can't teach offense, you can teach defense. So I think that they'll figure it out. And they're offensively so good. Braden Smith continues to play at a high level. I mean, the UCLA game, I understand they lost, but Braden made some big plays and in big moments. And I'm not too worried about the Boilermakers going forward. My next big riser, though, let's head over to the Big 12. Let's head over to Lawrence, Kansas. Let me say, this might be the most liked Kansas team I've ever seen. It seems normally in the national perspective, a lot of people dislike Kansas. This year seems to be the opposite. They got an absolute stud in Darren Peterson. I mean, I think now after the game against BYU and what he did down the stretch against Texas Tech has solidified himself as the number one pick. Put the pick in Adam Silver right now. I mean, come on, dude, 20 minutes, 18 points, 6 for 8 against DeBonce and the Cougars in Allen Fieldhouse. They go on the road, play Texas Tech, and listen. I honestly think that was one of the quietest 19-point games I've ever seen. I could have swore he had been struggling in that game. I honestly did not remember him hitting a shot before those 2 threes. And then you find out he has 19, had 11 points in the first. And I mean, he hit the big shots when they mattered. Kansas overall as a whole, though, I mean, we've talked about it to length on this podcast where this year's Kansas team is the polar opposite of last year's, where, yes, maybe they don't have the talent that last year's team did on paper, but they play with a lot of heart. They play with a lot of hustle, a lot of grit, the stuff that Bill Self wants out of his players and what's made his best teams at Kansas the best teams that he's had at Kansas. And I think you got to give so many flowers to guys like Bryson Tiller. The game he had against BYU, I honestly, in a way, I know the game was dominated by the narrative of DeBonce versus Peterson, but Bryson Tiller, I think, was the unsung hero. I believe he finished with 21 points in that game, if I'm not mistaken, close to a double-double, I think, as well. I think, should hop on mock drafts pretty soon. If not, he's going to be a monster in Lawrence for another year. Florida Badunga's been good. Melvin Council Jr., Trey White, I don't think there's enough that you can speak to how much both those guys have meant to the Kansas program this year. And Melvin Council Jr., just a dog, man. I know the jump shot isn't really there from beyond the arc, but he can pretty much do anything else on the floor. And I was telling Josh, I feel like there's a lot of similarities between this Kansas team and the 03 Syracuse team that won the national championship with Carmelo Anthony. I think you have guys in similar roles, dynamic scoring wing, that you can draw the comparison between Melo and Darren Peterson, tough guards who play a role like Jerry McNamara. Obviously, Melvin Council isn't the shooter that McNamara was, but he plays a similar role in just being a hard-nosed guard. Florida Badunga, I feel, is very similar to Warwick, Hakeem Warwick. I think that, hey, they got the coach to get it done to be able to get to Indianapolis. I don't know that they can win a national championship, but Final Four threat, I'm fully there on the Jayhawks right now.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you brought them up as a riser as well. I love Melvin Council Jr. I'm just going to say that right now. I think him and Trey White make for such a strong duo in the non-Peterson minutes. I think that and this is probably a quote straight from Bill Self, but he wanted to make players that were honored to wear that blue jersey. Right. And I think he found a squad because I'm not going to lie to you, this roster really isn't that good. You can't tell me that a Marco Jackson in a starting lineup in any scenario for Kansas history is incredible considering what they fielded in the past, but they make it work. And when Darren Peterson plays a full game like he does against Texas Tech, you know something's up, because that is incredible, and we want to see more of that. My second biggest follower actually goes to BYU, who they faced up against in that Debanza-Peterson battle, and Debanza did not look good. And as a whole, BYU has not looked good. I'm not there to panic on them just yet, but they have no Quad 1A wins, and their best win is Clemson on a buzzer beater. So I really can't say too much for them overall, but these past 2 games have really said a lot about where BYU is headed. Great home environment, great game, I felt, for a while with that BYU team against Arizona. I really thought that they should have won that game, and Rob Wright just unfortunately had a bad ending to it. But beyond that, I really felt like this game against Kansas really showed how unfortunate things are going for BYU, because you had a whole half without Darren Peterson. You very easily could have came back in a scenario where, as a second half team beat that BYU is, you do come back and you do win that game. And just like the Arizona game, you do come back, but you just can't get it to go. You're down 4 points with a minute left, and you just can't get that to work. And I'm not saying that BYU should win every comeback game that they force themselves back into, but we've seen this time and time again where, other than Clemson, BYU goes down heavily in the first half, comes back within the last 5 to 10 minutes, and they just can't do it because you need more time, obviously, and they're just not giving themselves the time. And if this continues up and they don't get a Quad 1A win, which there's a good chance that happens, I'm hitting the panic button, because this team was honestly able to win the Big 12 about a month back, and now I can't say that at all.
I mean, what have we been saying ever since their first high major game against UConn at TD Garden? Like, their play style is not a winning formula. Yes, you have NBA level talent between AJ DeBonza and Richie Saunders, and pro level talent Rob Wright, but I mean, yes, eventually you're going to hit shots. So you're going to get the foul calls. You're going to get to the free throw line. You're going to make the tough middies that Devonta loves. You're going to hit the threes that Richie eventually ends up hitting. But it's not a winning formula in college basketball. You need cohesive play. You need team basketball, and they just don't have that. There's really no offense that is ran by Kevin Young for this BYU Cougars team this year, as opposed to last year. I honestly felt he did a really good job, an admirable job, even with the players he had on the roster that I just don't think are anywhere near as talented as this year's team. And talent gets you so far, but you need grit, you need toughness, you need to be able to guard. This BYU team can't guard. I think they're a little undersized too. Kebakita is obviously a physical force, but he's kind of limited to the height at only being 6'8", if I'm not mistaken, on a good day. And I just think he gets physically outmatched a lot of times. We saw it against Kansas. I thought Flory and Bryson Tiller really were kind of be able to get what they wanted in that game. And I mean, Peterson, just the perimeter defense, they let Peterson get going. They let Melvin Council penetrate through the lane and get to the cup. And I just think it's not a winning formula. I'm worried if I'm a Cougars fan because I think you're on real upset watch in March.
Definitely.
On my next big riser, let's throw it over to Gainesville. I'm going to go with the Gator boys. These guys were my original SEC preseason pick to win the conference. And listen, I understand they struggled in their out-of-conference play. They had to play a lot of tough teams, though. You need to remember, and they played a lot of these games close. They lost Arizona opening night, who was the number one team in the country, and it wasn't by a large margin. They lost to Duke at Cameron Indoor, but by what I believe was a 2-point game. It was a 2-point loss for the Gators. And I mean, to go to Cameron Indoor and play as well as they did, I understand they were down pretty large at one point, but were able to make it interesting down the stretch. At against UConn in the JV Classic at Madison Square Garden, that ended up only being a 4-point win for the Huskies. And listen, they've just been on the wrong side of luck in some of these games. I understand they have a few bad losses this year, like against TCU. But it really does seem like Todd Golden's figured some things out about what lineups to play at what times. I think Boogie Flan and Xavier Lee haven't been stellar, but I think they've been a lot better than they were to start the year. And what you're getting out of your front three in the front court between Thomas Houck, who continues to play like an All-American this year and is being mocked to go in some lotteries, depending on what service you look for, draft results in. But Alex Condon has played a lot better and more consistently over the last 3 to 4 game sample size. Ruben Chinelu, he's been, just a monster on the defensive end of the basketball. You saw that play against Alabama where he switched onto LeBaron Philon, threw down the clamps on him, and ball got swung over to Den Holloway, and he was able to lock him up too and force a bad look, which ultimately led to Florida being able to rout Alabama by what I believe was near 40 points, if I'm not mistaken. They were able to surpass or get damn near close if they didn't to the 100-point threshold. I think Todd Golden's figured it out. I think they're head over heels the best team in the SEC right now. I understand Vanderbilt is still ranked 15th, but you need to remember Florida went into Nashville and took them out as well. I'm in on the Gators right now. I think they'll win the SEC. I'll stick with my preseason pick. In terms of their ceiling in March, I think they can get to a Final Four, win a national championship. Probably not. A lot of it, again, is going to be relying on the play of the guards between Boogie Flan and Xavier Lee, and what else they can get off the bench between Klavjar and CJ Ingram, some of those guys. So overall, I think if you're a Gator fan, you're definitely trending in the right direction. I'm happy to see the Gators on the rise.
Yeah, I'm once again glad you brought them up. This has just been a really big change around. The team has looked good, even in their bad moments. I think back to that Duke game where they were just a Slim Evans, shot away from winning at Cameron Indoor, which is still an incredible thought to have. And yeah, they had that bad game against Auburn at home where they lost that, but they're likely going to win the SEC right now. They had the big win at Vanderbilt. They're going to keep these wins going. They pummeled Alabama. Is my faller, actually. I'll get to that in a second, though, but I really do feel like this team is on the right move. My only problem is they're still an under 30% three-point shooting team, which is a concern when you're living off of guys like Boogie, Xavier, and even Urban Klavjar. I do like that Alex Condon is coming into form and Tommy Howe is looking like a first-team All-American at times. But if you want to win a national championship, you need to have that three-point shooting, and you need to make sure that a guy like Boogie Flan and particularly Xavier Lee keep up the success they had, because Xavier Lee looked great at Vanderbilt. Boogie Flan looked great this past month. They need consistency, and we haven't seen that yet, and I really hope that happens. My big follower is, as I mentioned before, Alabama. This team was at one point the lead candidate for winning the SEC. They looked like a national championship contending team for their first like 5 games. They were looking great through a disastrously strong schedule, and going into even into conference play, they still looked great. Then they lost at Vanderbilt. Then they lost at home to Tennessee, and now they get pummeled on the road by nearly 30 by Florida. And I think there's a lot of things that can go into it, I think. And this is more of a personal thing, but I was never a big fan of LeBaron Philon. I don't want to put the blame on him, but I think people were expecting too much when it came to like expecting him to be leading the offense in the way that any previous Alabama guard has been. Like, this is not a Brandon Miller. This is not anybody of the 2020s that you could fill in for LeBaron here. And I like him too. And I like Aiden Holloway as well, but I think the problems with both of them have really started to show. And yeah, call it the Charles Bediako curse, but this Bama team is really not finding a rhythm. And we're getting down to the wire here, and you're unranked. So
yeah, it seems like everything is kind of crashing down all at once for Bama. They are kind of the villain of the sport right now because of the whole Charles Bediako saga. Of course, if you've been following up with that, Charles Bediako played in the G League. He previously played at Alabama on the Brandon Miller team that was the number one overall seed in the 22-23 NCAA tournament. That was NATO's best defensive team since his tenure at Alabama began. I believe they were fifth defensively per KenPom that year. And I honestly thought that, while yes, I don't agree that he should be, I do agree that he shouldn't be able to play college basketball. I did think that would do wonders for improving the Crimson Tide on that end of the floor. But honestly, they haven't. They still really can't stop the ball. They can't guard. The perimeter is very weak defensively between, LeBaron and Aiden Holloway. And yes, they can score the basketball, but when you're giving up 100 points, you can't expect to win a game, no matter how good you are offensively. The defense is just not there. And I mean, NATO, he can complain about Rubin and Condon or how camping in the paint for 7 or 8 seconds when it should be getting called, or shouldn't. But you shouldn't be bringing players back from the G League either. So in a way, it almost feels that, I don't know if deserves the right word, but I guess in a way it's kind of karma for bringing a professional back to college.
yeah, I don't really know what's going on with the whole G League thing, and I don't even want to get into the whole Amari Bailey situation, which is just breaking right now. And I'm sure we'll have another video about that soon, but I don't really get this Alabama team. They have a great chance with Auburn in the Iron Bowl this weekend to maybe bounce back right now and possibly get ranked at the end of the season, but the ship is sinking.
Yeah. And while we're on the topic of struggling teams, let's get into the coaching hot seat carousel this year. A lot of coaches seem, their seats might be as hot as the sun right now with how bad their programs have been playing. I'll start off and throw out a pick. Adrian Autry at Syracuse. Red Autry I honestly have felt he never should have been the guy for the Syracuse Orange program. I just think, you watch Syracuse play, it's very evident. He is a good recruiter. He's brought in some talent over since he's taken over for Coach Jim Boeheim. But at the same time, there's no offense that is ran by Syracuse. He just asks guys to go out and play playground ball. And yes, you got some talented players this year like J.J. Starling, as well as Donovan Freeman. Donnie Freeman's been really good. He had a good game last night in Chapel Hill against UNC, but nonetheless, Syracuse, who was actually able to make it a little bit interesting down the stretch after being down 32 with 10 minutes left in the second half. I think Autry needs to go. I honestly understood he was next in line when Boeheim stepped down, but I very much felt it should have went to Mike Hopkins back when he was with the program. And GMAC is now the head coach at Siena. So I would like to see Cuse go outside the program going forward, honestly. I think there's some other names on this list that I wouldn't mind coming back east, one in particular, which maybe Josh might end up mentioning or I'll get to mentioning.
Yeah.
But yeah, Cuse, Red Autry needs to go. They need to get back to regaining their standard as a program because they should be a lot better than what they have been the last couple seasons.
Yeah, no, I am actually glad that you mentioned Siena as well as the candidate. See, I forgot his name right now, but yeah. Audrey's done. This one is just a shame, considering the fact that this is Kai and Anthony's freshman year. This is Sadiq White's, I think Sadiq White's freshman year. He was, by the way, a top 40 prospect in what could have been a even stronger freshman class, and there's no development. You're wasting the last year of J.J. Starling, who is a 20-point-per-game ceiling type of player. You could have been a drafted guy. And in an ACC like this, there was a space for them to be. They very easily could have been in a Clemson type of role with with the current coaching they have right now. But no, they bottom out early. They don't even win a game at Players Era, and it really just doesn't look like they're capable of keeping anything together. I do hope that there is this particular change for the Siena coach. But Brett Audrey is still on the coaching staff next year. We riot. This is horrible for a Syracuse fan base that has not seen success in 3+ years. They had mid tournament since what, 2021?
2021.
Haven't gotten a 1 seed in nearly a decade now. Like, there is a great culture in Syracuse basketball, and we just haven't seen it, and we need to go back to it as soon as possible because they have been a non-factor in the ACC for nearly a decade now, or for nearly a half decade now, and that's got to change.
Yeah. I mean, listen, like just with how historic and how rich the history is of Syracuse basketball. I mean, even this year, you beat Tennessee, which honestly, that win hasn't even aged greatly. I understand Tennessee's ranked right now, but they probably shouldn't be in. I mean, you got fans storming the court. That shouldn't happen at the Dome. Syracuse is too good of a program to have fans storming after a win, and need to get back to their winning ways. But Josh, us, who's your first hot seat pick?
I'm going to go with Wes Miller. We brought him up a few times now. A Cincy coach. Honestly, just another shame because look at this roster. Baba Miller was projected to be a first-round pick based on that preseason win against Michigan. Like, we were about to see an insane ride from the Cincinnati team that honestly, like, has not shown it, but has also shown it. I know a lot of people online have always said that Cincinnati has shown flashes of being an incredibly good team, but also lost to East Michigan at home and have been unfortunate. Like, they have that one win against Iowa State, but that's nothing really to say. This team has nothing. This team, unfortunately, has nothing that has been gained by Wes Miller being their coach. This is without any of the controversy going around with, what's his name? He rejoined the program actually mid-season.
Jizzle James.
Jizzle James, which, like, I think even beyond the Jizzle James controversy, like, there's just something wrong. There's just something wrong with Wes Miller because the team was great. The team was great. He recruited well. He got good transfers. And here they are right now, bottom of the Big 12. He's going to leave. And I think a really good replacement is Jared Calhoun out of Utah State. Utah State is obviously just known for just producing one-year coaches. Look at Ryan Odom. Look at Danny Sprinkle. Like, they just produce good ones. And this is perfect for Jared Calhoun. This is his alma mater. And I think he can really grow in the Cincy area. I mean, the pay isn't crazy, and it's definitely it's an opportunity for a step-up spot, maybe in 5 years' time to a top 10 team in the country. But he could definitely make Cincy into a legit Big 12 competitor team for years to come, which is something that we haven't seen since Cincinnati joined the Big 12 earlier in the decade. And I really do feel like this is definitely going to be one of the surprisingly fast changes that we see. But yeah, Wes Miller has to go. I think he definitely leaves by the end of the season.
Yeah, I love the Jared Calhoun shout there. I mean, with what he's done at Utah State this year, I mean, he's also the Cincy alum, which I believe you mentioned as well. He'd be a great replacement. I mean, that Cincy program should be so much better than what they are. With the talent they have, of course, regaining Jizzle James in the middle of the season, as well as what they have in Sean Abayev, who's uber talented freshman and definitely, I think, capable of being more than what we've kind of seen him be as of late with how hot he was to begin the season, especially against Michigan in that preseason exhibition. I definitely think that they should be in a lot better spot than where they are. But let's head over to the Big East. Let's head over to Friartown. Seems like the fans are on boat with me here when I throw out this pick. Kim English, I think it's time for, the Kim English experiment in Providence, Rhode Island to come to an end. I just think that while I gave him the benefit of the doubt for his first 2 seasons, just because I felt like he has arguably had some of the worst injury luck of any head coach in the country between his first year at Friartown, where you lose Bryce Hopkins on the ACL tear. Really, honestly, you could pin all the blame on Bryce Hopkins' injury history, where, I mean, that year, they looked really good between what they had with Devin Carter, who was the Big East player of the year that season. Providence should have made the NCAA tournament, by the way, that season. I'm still not over that. But him, you had Ticket Gaines, Josh Oduro, who was a really solid 4-man for that team that season. And I mean, you have Bryce Hopkins as well, and that team's definitely going to the NCAA tournament. They're definitely ranked throughout the duration of that season. They already picked up some big wins in Big East play that year before the Hopkins injury. And then you missed the NCAA tournament. There's a lot of hype going into Friartown the following season with getting guys like Jaden Pierre back, and he made a big leap. However, Hopkins only played 3 games for the Friars last year, cashing on $750,000 in NIL, and then jump ship to go to St. John's to play for Rick Pitino. And again, kind of gave him the benefit of the doubt there, although he didn't really do too much to add any talent outside of the players he retained from the year prior, which I definitely think you could hold against him. And this year, I thought he recruited really well at the portal. I mean, he got a lot of talented players: Jason Edwards, Jalen Sellers. Swinner Runze, I think, has been good at moments of the year. Ryan Mila's been solid. Stephen Fox is arguably the Big East freshman of the year. And I mean, his teammate, Jameer Jones, has been really good too. Providence's first 5 stars since Chris Dunn. And Providence is towards the bottom of the Big East now. So I think, this was the year. You give him the chance. Put together your team. We'll give you the funding you need to go and get the players you want. And he got them, and they're just not playing collectively very well. I thought following their win against St. John's, they were going to be able to turn things around. But I just don't think that Kim's the guy, man. Good recruiter, but head coach, I just don't know that I don't think he's there, schematics and X's and O's wise.
Yeah, once again, another great coach with another great roster that fumbles very early on. I thought this was the final, it was the last straw for Kim English. This was his opportunity to really stake his claim to the Big East. He had Stephen Fox, he had Jameer Jones, he had Jason Edwards. He had, I thought, a really good starting five, a really good bench at times. And they had opportunities. They could have won the Virginia Tech game. They could have won the UConn game. They won at St. John's. There was momentum at certain points in the season, but looking back on it, it really was fraudulent in a way. And yeah, Kim English has had a lot of bad luck put on him. But also at the same time, this is a very demanding, Big East franchise. This is like This is a hard to please franchise too, and they haven't had success in his time there. I think they've had like one tournament bid, if I'm not wrong, if even. And actually, I don't think they have had a tournament bid with him around, and that's a shame because Providence is known for being a top 5 team in the Big East, and we're not playing like that. It shows. I think this also does apply to Ed Cooley down in Georgetown. I don't know if he gets fired after this season, but once again, had a great roster, had the talent ready for him, had shown success early on. He looked like Georgetown was going to be a tournament team for a few weeks, and then they very quickly fell apart. And look at them now. They're even worse, actually, I should say, than Providence. And I wouldn't be surprised if Georgetown, another great fan base that has not had a good moment in the tournament in probably a decade by now, actually, sees Ed Cooley with disgust enough that they fire him. But I don't really want to dwell on him too long because I don't think he actually gets fired this year, but he's definitely going to get fired within the next season or so. I want to give it to Bobby Hurley out in Arizona State. I feel bad for him just because he himself has said this too, but Arizona State's not good for basketball.
Yeah.
Like Arizona's great. They've managed well, but Arizona State doesn't have the vibes for that. Their arena is not packed. It's never really given to it's just not anything that you can expect from a good Big 12 arena or a good Big 12 fan base. And it's Arizona State. I guess say what you want about the biggest party school in the country, but I just feel like you can only gripe about that for so long because look at last season. Last season you had Jaden Quaidens, you had Jason Sanan, you had all around a really good roster, and you failed miserably. And then this year, you didn't have a good roster, and you're a bad recruiter in general, which is pretty well known in most public surfer. You could have been a bubble team. You could have done well, but, one bid in the past, 6 years or however long he's been coaching is just abysmal. And he needs to get fired. I don't know why he wasn't fired last year, because I think he probably should have been. And I think just because his last name is Hurley has been keeping him alive, but this is not going to matter anymore for him. I really feel like the door has been closed.
Yeah, I mean, hey, send him back east, man. Send him to Cuse. There's a real chance that you mentioned the quote Bobby Hurley had about how Arizona State is just not really a basketball school, and there's a real possibility maybe he just does it himself and steps down rather than him being fired. Because I mean, how many years is it going on now that we're talking about Bobby Hurley being on the hot seat and him getting fired there? And it hasn't happened yet. And who knows, it might not happen this for another year. But I think he needs to come back east. That's where his family grew up. Obviously, the Jersey pipelines. He needs to come back to the Northeast. I think I would love to see him take on the head coach role at Syracuse. But he's been a decent recruiter. I mean, Sanan, the most recent 5-star he was able to land for that program. He's now coincidentally back in the Northeast now, playing for Rick Pitino at St. John's. But my next coach I kind of want to throw out is I'm going to go Jake Diebler here at Ohio State. I think that This Ohio State team should be a lot better than what they are. I'm not saying they should be a second weekend team, but they were definitely tournament in my eyes going into the season. I mean, Bruce Stewart Jr., I think, is one of the most underrated point guards in the country. And I mean, he's continued to put up productive numbers, but the just on-court results aren't there as a program collectively. Yeah, I mean, can't tell you the last time that he's been able to get them to the NCAA tournament. And I think that, in a Big Ten, Ohio State, with the history they have in basketball in the Big Ten, it's just they should not be missing the tournament the way they have done the last couple of seasons. I think time's running out on Jake Diebler because he's had to deal with some player issues last couple of seasons too, and I just don't think he's the right guy for that program right now. I couldn't tell you who I'd like to see take over for Ohio State off the top of my head, but I think it's due time that they make some changing in Columbus.
Yeah, and I think the way that you can look at Jake Diebler right now is if they make the tournament, if they're the last team in, Diebler
Right.
stays. If they don't make the tournament, Diebler's out. And at the end of the day, he's riding off of the last 7 games of Chris Holtman's season from 2024.
Right.
When he has no tournament resume to speak of. They should have made it last year. They should have made it 2 years ago, actually. They honestly should have made it all 3 years, and they're probably not going to make it any of these 3 years, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think it's a real shame for one of the best fan bases in college basketball and in the Big Ten itself. Ohio State really needs this, especially given what they're bringing in for next year and the fact that, Bruce Thornton is going to not have a tournament experience. He's a dog. He could really lead this team to something else. And there's nothing. There's just nothing that Diebler has done that has been overwhelmingly confident, other than the fact that he's just an interim coach that has existed for longer than his stay, and Ohio State just didn't have a better option at the time. And I feel like one of the better things that has happened recently is that there are so many good mid-major coaches that have risen up to high major positions. I think Mark Byington, for example, is a great choice, and that there could be 5 to 10 Mark Byingtons and some others in this upcoming coaching circle. And I feel like even if you do make the tournament and you are that 11 seed or whatever, there is probably a better guy out there other than Jake Diebler. I just don't understand why Ohio State has stuck with him so long when the options are just better. But if you want to keep around a guy for the vibes, I see it, but he just has to give you tournament wins, and that hasn't happened. So I obviously don't see it. My last one is actually a little bit of a mistake. I had told Kanaye earlier today that Jerome Tang was fired. Kansas State is looking to buy out his contract, so it looks like he's going to be fired, which is no shock. Kansas State is 1-8 in conference play. While their roster did look sneaky good for a moment, me and Kanaye were both pretty high on it, unfortunately. This is the second straight season where Jerome Tang has given us a sneaky good roster. Think about last year's as well, and has underperformed horribly. And, we're talking about riding off of 7 games. We're riding off an Elite 8 here, so I can see why, after as disappointing as the season as it was last year, that you keep him around. But it looks like Kansas State has already decided for us what's going to happen. He'll likely be fired within the next month and a half. And I really don't know where Kansas State goes from here, because they need to compete again in the Big 12.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas State, that's one of the misses I'm most upset about going into the season. I like the players they brought in. But like you mentioned, the second year in a row where they bring in players that are sneaky good. I mean, Coleman Hawkins, Doug McDaniel last year. I mean, it was there. They just couldn't put it together. I just think that, they tend to spend on the big names. PJ Haggerty, Coleman Hawkins, back-to-back off seasons where they spend $2 million plus on a player in the transfer portal, and just it doesn't translate to on-court success all the time. You need to bring in guys that are going to collectively contribute to winning, and Jerome Tang just really hasn't been able to do that since the 2023 Elite Eight. Guys like Keontae, how am I forgetting his name? Marquise Noel, and just how collective and all together that team was. It's tough to replicate that. I'm sure Jerome Tang's found that out the hard way. And yeah, I think it's probably time that K-State moves on. That program historically should be a lot better than what they have been the last 2 seasons. I understand why that fan base is so frustrating, why their AD is probably looking to move forward and trying to undergo the search for a new head coach there.
I wanted to bring about Hubert Davis to the conversation. I know UNC is having a far better season than we originally thought, but at the same time, UNC expects a lot. This is one of the most needy franchises in college basketball. And Hubert Davis is riding off of a lot more than any of their coaches mentioned. It's not like a Elite Eight run one time or a few wins in a row or something like that. He's riding off of a Final Four appearance, a national championship, a one seed in 2024, but also had last year's season where everything just fell apart very quickly. And this year, the team looks decent. Caleb Wilson looks great. I mean, congrats on recruiting him. As a whole, this roster doesn't really hold much outside of him and maybe like Seth Trimble. Like, I just feel like this team could really lose in the first round. And if they don't do anything this season and next season, the talks will continue because there were a lot of talks going into this season that this might be his last year in the program if he doesn't shape up.
Right. I mean, I just think that he got that big extension of the offseason, so it's tough to have these conversations right now. But I mean, like you mentioned, that UNC athletic department and their fans, they're very results oriented and they want results. One, he's still riding off. We're talking about guys riding off of past success. I mean, none more than Hubert Davis riding off that magical Final Four national championship appearance that they had in 2022 against Kansas, where they ultimately blew the lead and lost that game. But yeah, it seems like every other year, Hubert Davis misses the tournament or has a bad season or, comes back and has a decent one. I mean, in 24, they were a one seed, but the following year, they ended up just, barely making the NCAA tournament when a lot of people, including myself and Josh, did not think they should have gotten in. This year, they'll be in. They're ranked right now. Huge matchup coming up this Saturday against Duke in Chapel Hill. So, hey, listen, I think there's a real possibility where they get swept in this series against Duke. They might pull the trigger and let Hubert Davis go. But, I mean, shoot, you already see UNC fans talking about trying to get Hurley to come over and coach it for the Tar Heels, which I'm sorry if you're a Tar Heels fan, that's not happening. Let's just call it what it is. That's not going to happen. But nonetheless, Hubert Davis, want to give the guy one more chance here. If they can go on a little bit of a magical run in March, similar to 2022, then hey, maybe that's enough to keep his job. But again, it's a lot of it's going to be determined on how well they finish in ACC conference play as well as how they do in the series against Duke. ACC tournament play is going to be really interesting to see too, because if UNC can spring off a couple wins in a row to be able to take home an ACC tournament title, then that's definitely going to help his case to keep his job. But if they go out first weekend in March, that I think he could get the boot.
Yeah, I really feel like, once again, UNC is a very high expectation franchise, and results have just not been pouring in. Like, you have occasional years where you make something, but UNC has not won a national championship since, 2017? And it's weighing on Tar Heels fans, especially given the fact that Duke has been dominating them the past 2 seasons and probably next season as well, given the fact that John Shara has really taken the leap. I don't want to say anything to imply that Hubert Davis deserves this or should they move on or whatnot. But looking at the facts and looking at the likelihood that UNC does not make a Sweet 16 this year, I really don't see a reason to keep him around. I would let him have another season if I were at UNC and I had the power to do that, but that might be just tossing a coin at that much. Like, you really can't expect much once you've already seen it so many times. And it's nice, I'm sure Hubert Davis would be a great coach at an Ohio State, for example, but this just can't keep going on. That's just the truth of the matter.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love the points you brought up. I'm completely there with you on Hubert Davis. It's going to be interesting to see how the AD at UNC ultimately handles his case. But that's pretty much going to wrap up everything we have for you guys today. Again, the college basketball season has continued to really just be so impressed with how good the top teams are and how just incredible this freshman class is. I think the best we've ever seen. I fully expect us to continue to see big games out of the guys in that class. Big games to come. We mentioned Duke, UNC, St. John's, UConn on Friday night. Something that's a game that me and Josh are both super excited for. But until the next episode that we get out to you guys, we'll see you all next time.